I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with the Abyss battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. So on this episode, it's Sam Soholt, and we talk about a lot of things, conservation and other things like that. And I just, we'll get into that episode, but I wanted to put out a little statement saying I apologize for missing an episode last week. I was on an eternal quest to find some toilet paper during this COVID crisis. No, I'm just kidding. I had some things going on, and by the time I was going to put out an episode, it was the middle of the week, and I just decided to put it out on the normal time on Sundays, so I apologize for that. I'll try not to let it happen again, and here's the episode. Okay, I'm talking to Sam Soholt, and Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Sam Soholt here. Probably most, well known for my photography and public land advocacy work, driving around in a public land school bus and raising awareness about public land issues and just trying to get people involved. And of course, my dog has got a squeaky toy over here.
That's perfectly fine. We keep it real.
Okay, good. Yep. Yep. Most of the time he's pretty chill, just napping on the couch, but apparently me talking on the computer, he wants to be part of it.
Understand. So did you take him with you when you went to Pheasant Fest over the weekend?
I did not. Nope, I did not. He stayed home with in-laws, actually, because my wife came down to the cities as well and hung out with me at Pheasant Fest. And just he stayed back.
So how is it being a newlywed? Everything's still good?
Good. Yeah, no, everything's good. It's even better than before. We actually have a place, and it's the first time I've had a permanent home since 2014. So it's kind of nice to have a home base and place to put all my gear and resort and pack up and have a place to actually go back to.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. It's definitely a good feeling. So I want to ask you, how did you grow up, man? Were you like pretty big into hunting as a kid, or how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much born into it. My dad was avid sportsman, and before we came along, he was really into archery hunting and did a lot of it. He grew up in Wisconsin and started archery hunting a lot, and then lived in North Dakota for a while and chased ducks a lot while he was in college. And then him and my mom moved out to Montana, where he was archery hunted deer and elk a lot, and just he was really into it. And then when we were all born, all three of us, I've got an older brother and a younger sister, he kind of gave up the archery thing. But as soon as any of us were old enough to walk, we were basically following him around in pheasant fields and started in the upland side of things when we were really little. I think he just wanted to have an activity where we could all be together. And then when my brother was, I'm trying to think how old he was, 14, 15, he got invited to go on a youth duck hunt with some neighbors. And that was it. We were off and running in the waterfowl world, and basically lived and breathed waterfowling until I was 24, to the point of having 30 dozen floating mallard decoys and a whole pile of goose decoys. And I think at one point we had like 9 or 10 duck boats, ranging from little canoes all the way up to 16-foot, boats with blinds and everything. So yeah, I was raised in a hunting family for sure.
So did you ever even deer hunt before then, or was it just something that, I mean, kind of on the back burner because of the duck hunting? Or
Yeah, it was definitely on the back burner. We had a cousin had some family land in the center part of South Dakota, and it was like every 3 years or so we would apply or have a point, a preference point, and then we would apply and go rifle hunt. I think I did 2 rifle hunts growing up when, on that family land, but it was never like a focus. It was just something that we did when we couldn't go duck hunting anymore. and and then my older brother chose college just because he wanted to learn how to elk hunt. And he kept telling me, like, you need to get a bow, you need to start archery hunting, you need to, and at this point I was going to school at North Dakota State, and I was duck hunting 3 to 4 days a week, all fall, and was still just like completely engrossed in the waterfowl world. And I went out the fall of 2009 and filmed him and his buddy on an elk hunt, and basically drove back to Fargo and bought a bow the day after I got home. So I got into the archery thing and started archery hunting the next fall, and then was off and running in that. I think there's probably something wrong with me. I have a hard time like just dipping my toe in anything. Like if I start something and really like it, I'm going.
I've got the same problem. I hear that from everybody. You don't just do something half-ass. You go all the way, don't you?
That's
So,
right. Yep.
But so, where'd you grow up then? Was it like in South Dakota or
Yep.
yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Grew up in South Dakota. Was born in Aberdeen, and then grew up in Sioux Falls. And yeah, and then
That's actually kind of the duck hunting mecca, though. I mean, it's a sportsman's paradise as far as all that kind of stuff goes, right? I mean,
it really is. Yeah, it's a cool state, and there's a lot of opportunity not only for residents but for non-residents. I think the coolest thing that they do is they have, for the waterfowl side of things, is they actually have a draw for a waterfowl tag. And unlike most other states where you can buy an over-the-counter license, you have to put in for it in order to go, and they have a limited number of licenses. It's a lot of licenses. There's almost a guaranteed draw, but it's nice that they kind of protect the quality of the hunt for anybody who's either lives there or is coming to the state to hunt.
so I'm kind of curious about how you got started on the whole public land thing, Sam. Was it
Mhm.
was it there a moment in your life that just kind of solidified the fact that, these public lands are precious and are important, or was it just kind of you grew up around it and you knew it and you moved somewhere else? What was the deal that really brought it to light for you?
Yeah, I grew up, like looking back on it, I grew up hunting almost, I wouldn't say exclusively, but I would say it was a higher percentage of public land than private land. We would knock on doors and stuff and chase ducks, but for the most part, we were hunting, walking areas or waterfowl production areas or state game production areas. But growing up, selfishly, I had no idea how the public land system worked. And you just kind of take it for granted. You just see it as this place that is open to hunting. And I always just believed that would always be there. And so after I moved west and it really opened my eyes to how much public land there was, like out in the mountains, like endless acres of national forest and wilderness area. And when all of the talk surrounding public land transfer legislation was happening, in basically an election year in 2016, it really caught my attention, and I started doing a little more research on what that meant. And it just, something struck a chord with me, and like deep down, I couldn't just kind of let that go by and just kind of see what happened. It was pretty early on in all of that, like learning about all that stuff, that I felt like I needed to do something bigger and be a bigger voice in the message, and at the very least speak up and try to get other people involved.
Right. So that's kind of how it happened kind of for me, I never grew up with a whole lot of public land around me. There was obviously some. I didn't hunt much of it. Most of the people I knew hunted private. And up until recently, I just started hunting public land. And then what solidified it for me was definitely going out west and just seeing the massive amounts of just untapped beauty that it's yours. I mean, anybody can go out with the right application or whatever and apply for a tag and get that. And that's kind of what did it for me. But I'm kind of curious. I didn't get to go to Pheasant Fest, finite days of vacation and whatnot. And obviously I want to save them for hunting rather than going to a bunch of trade shows and stuff. But what'd you kind of talk about there?
Yeah, so Pheasant Fest was a blast. The organization reached out to me last summer and asked if I would be willing to bring the bus down to Pheasant Fest and park in the new public lands pavilion that they set up down there, and then be a voice on the stage. So it was really cool because all of us that were in that public lands pavilion, we signed a contract that whatever revenue we brought in during the show, at least 10% of that would go back to Pheasants Forever for their Build a Wildlife Area campaign, which if anybody listening is unfamiliar with that, what Pheasants Forever does is they take donations and they put them into a pot, and then they leverage that, and they're able to match donations from either other organizations or state agencies or other donors, and they basically turn, let's call it, $20,000 into $100,000, and they are able to, that's just an example, but they're able to purchase chunks of private land and then replant and manage the land and turn it over to the state agencies as an open public hunting area. So during that whole event, as always, $5 from every item we sold will go directly to a conservation group. And at this event, everything's going to Pheasants Forever. So, but yeah, they were, gave me an hour a day on the stage, and I was just able to talk about growing up and, my experiences growing up and hunting public land, and then what we've done with the bus, and how much money we've raised for conservation groups and through different initiatives, and then kind of what we've got going into the future. But it was cool just to be able to tell that story kind of in person to Friday was a small group, Saturday was a little bit bigger group, and then Sunday was pretty low key, but it was fun to just really have in-depth conversations with people right in front of you about all that stuff.
No, that's awesome. That's an awesome thing to do too. I mean, anytime anybody gets to be part of something like that, it's pretty special. Mm-hmm. So your Stamp It Forward project, I'm just curious.
Sure.
I mean, I get the concept of it. I've kind of always knew that. Well, actually, I didn't know it until I started buying a waterfowl stamp, right? But then I was aware of it. But how did you come up with that?
Yeah, I was just looking at all of the things, the way conservation is funded, and, through things like Pittman-Robertson Act and licenses and tags, obviously, and then all of the work that conservation organizations do. But one of the best tools that the country has is the duck stamp program. And if your listeners don't already know, duck stamp was basically founded in 1934. Ding Darling was the artist that drew the first stamp, and it was $1 back then. But when they proposed the stamp, they put into law that by law, 98% of the money raised from the duck stamp has to go directly to things like purchasing more wetlands or preserving more wetlands or improving wetland habitat, which not only set up the National Refuge System, but it has done basically save migratory bird species, and then is a positive and beneficial thing for over 700 other species of animal simply due to purchasing more wetlands. So that's kind of how the duck stamp works. And I don't remember the figure, but typically about 1.5 million duck stamps are sold every year. So you're looking at, upwards of $40 million or more is generated per year just through the sale of duck stamps and waterfowl hunters having to buy a duck stamp. So after looking at this tool, the original concept was, how do we just get people to talk about the duck stamp and what it means, and figure out a way to have quote unquote influencers or people within the hunting space talk more about the duck stamp and encourage people to go out and buy either additional duck stamps, or if they don't duck hunt at all, to buy their first one. And that would have been great, but I just couldn't figure out a way to like tally the impact that would have had. And so rather than do that, I decided that we should figure out a way to just have all of the money funneled directly through me. And with every penny that we raised, I would go out and buy an additional duck stamp. And so we bought the initial 100, and so took $2,500 out of our donation account and went to post offices, and I bought the initial 100 stamps, and then put out a video that said basically, if you would like to make a direct donation to conservation, send me money through PayPal and Venmo, and every penny that we brought in, we went out and bought more duck stamps. And then on top of that, there were 5 companies that jumped in and each bought an additional 100 stamps. And so overall, by the time it was all said and done in early December, we had bought just over 1,000 duck stamps, so raising $25,000 for conservation.
I'm wondering how many actually, because I know it was a lot. I mean, your movement, the whole Stamp It Forward movement really took off. I ended up with 3 duck stamps.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I bought
Yep.
one for myself. I bought an extra one to give to a buddy that maybe didn't have the money at the time to get a stamp this year. And then I ended up buying the shirt, so
Yep,
support the
exactly.
public lands.
Yeah,
Got the third
yeah.
one, and I'm like, holy crap. But you know what? That's cool, because it's always one of those things. The first thing they do is make you sign that stamp.
Right.
And then so you're trashing it. And I really like to hold on to them. So a lot of times, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I wouldn't sign it. So that way I could have the stamp and collect it.
Keep it at the end of the year.
But now, I mean, you really got me thinking, well, what the heck? Why not just buy 2 stamps, keep one in the book, and then use the other one? And so I kind of started going along that route now, or at least I will from this point on. And I think that's really awesome. And I'm kind of curious just to see, though, the amount of numbers as far as total purchases this year and how much you may have just affected that.
Yeah, I'm really curious too, because obviously, we bought 1,000, and there were some people that bought their duck stamp through us. Basically, they ordered a shirt, and and that's the other thing we did is, on top of buying the 1,000, you just said that you bought a shirt, but we were able to leverage those stamps into an additional fundraiser and gave them away through our website. And so, not only did people get a stamp, but they basically donated another $5 to conservation, and we were able to raise close to another $5,000 for conservation. So, but yeah, it was cool that through that whole thing, I kept getting tagged in people where they hadn't bought anything from us, but they had donated to the cause, and then they went out and they bought 2 or 3 stamps themselves. And so, I would say, conservatively, I would say it was even double what we did. I would say, it probably impacted it close to an additional 1,000 stamps overall. So, 50,000. But the goal for 2020 is to multiply all that by 10, and we're shooting to buy 10,000 duck stamps in 2020.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's awesome. So I got another question for you, and it's kind of one that, I mean, just where do all these ideas truly come from? I mean, they're pretty creative. Is there like just a motivation behind it, a source behind it? I mean, you got some pretty cool ideas. That, the boss, everything,
I think just that's a really good question. You should. I wish I had written down all the ideas that don't make it to the top of the pile. So it's. I like to think that just from living the freelance life and having to get creative in ways to, make money and make a living for myself doing what I love to do. I think it just taps into that part of your brain where you start to think in different ways. And I've never worked in a conservation organization. I've never, I've given money to them. But I think not going down that path allows me to maybe think of business ideas and ways to generate money that, people that work in organizations, like it's been done this way for so long, like it allows us we can kind of come up with whatever we want because we're not tied to any one system. And so I think that really truly allows us to be creative in the ways that we're generating dollars for conservation. And yeah, you just pick one that seems the best and go for it.
See if it works. I mean,
That's right.
did you ever think that they'd become as big as they have? I mean, especially like the public land bus. I mean, that's an icon now. It'll always be forever remembered as the public land bus.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it would be as big as it has become, and obviously that was always the goal, and you really just gotta, you go for it and you shoot for, like shoot for as high as you can go, and hopefully you land somewhere right in the middle, at the worst. But I think the bus was something that every single person could relate to, like almost everybody at some point or another in their life rode on a school bus, and to see it changed into something as, comfortable and quote unquote cozy as like a little rolling hunting lodge, something with a bigger purpose. I think it really struck a chord with people, and they were able to kind of think back on memories of childhood or whatever. It just kind of brought like a nostalgia to the whole thing, using the bus as a vehicle rather than anything else. But no, I didn't think it would take off like it did, and I'm just happy it did, and it allows us to, leverage the, like just the acknowledgement of the bus. It just allows us to leverage that into more dollars for protecting places that we all love to use.
What do you think the future plans for the bus are? I mean, is there anything in the future for that?
The bus is going to become more of an event rig. It's a centerpiece for everything else that we're trying to do. It's not a super efficient vehicle to drive around.
No.
So it'll be more of an event rig, just a way to bring people in and start that conversation, explain like who we are as an organization at Public Land Tees, and kind of what the whole mission is. But yeah, that's why we're doing things like moving towards, transitioning into the van project, which is a way for us to have basically a mini bus and a 4-wheel drive version of a mini bus.
Yeah.
And, we get to talk about doing a build out on that. So it'll relate to everybody who's like dream of like this ultimate hunting rig. And then at the same time, we get to continue to talk about how important public lands and conservation is, while having an absolute blast roaming around the country in a 4x4 van. So yeah, that's the next big project. And then who knows from there, like I think both my brother and I, who run Public Land Tees together, I think our ultimate dream would just be to build cool hunting rigs and talk about them and leverage those into ways to raise money for, protecting public lands. And I think that's the next step, is just continuing kind of down this path that we've kind of like not really tried to start, but started anyway, of being really like just giant 6-year-olds that just dream up things and then have the means to build them.
No, that's awesome. I got caught one day on a wormhole that ended up being like 5 hours later, YouTubing and Instagram, looking at pictures of different hunt rigs and different things. And it's like, holy cow, you could really get lost in all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got like, I was looking at those Kimbo living campers or whatever they are that in the back, because me and my buddy were talking about making something similar to that. And then and then next thing you know, I was looking at vans and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, there's some stuff that they build in Russia that is just like insane.
Yeah, all the Unimog stuff. Yeah. And like, I mean, it's wild. Like my first kind of entry into that whole thing, I went to the Overland Expo West in Flagstaff, Arizona a few years back, and looking at all these rigs that people have built up. It's unreal what they've done to them and like what you can do. And so just being able to dip our toes in with the van this year is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, no, I think that'll definitely be cool. So now I kind of want to transition a little bit, if you don't mind, into hunting. And you do a lot of hunts in a year. And
yes.
I'm just kind of curious, is there like a rhyme or reason, or, I mean, do you have an application strategy, or is it just like, hey, these guys are hunting over here, I'm going to go, hang out with them, shoot some photos, hunt, or, I mean, how do you plan all that out?
So I don't get too caught up in like the points game or like the application strategy, because the more time that goes on, the more I realize that there are unbelievable over-the-counter hunts all over the country. I mean, there's more good hunts that you could do in a year than way more than time allows, or in a lifetime, really. And so once you start to kind of figure out that exists, you stop worrying about like, oh, I hope I draw this, trophy hunting unit, because it turns out if you work your ass off, you can find trophy animals or not, like it depends on what your focus is. You can find really cool experiences pretty much anywhere you go. So the way that I run my year is I kind of take it month by month, or, like in the fall, August, I start chasing antelope, and I usually don't do a lot of that, but it's say 5 to 7 days of antelope hunting, kind of freshen up the skills again on the spot and stock thing, and dust the bow off and dust the legs off. And then September is typically 100% elk from September 1st till the end of September. This year, actually going to go up on a moose hunt instead of elk hunting, which is a decent trade-off. And then October has always been my mule deer month. Most people don't think about mule deer hunting in October. They usually typically wait for the rut in November. But my November is so filled with whitetail hunts that I put my focus and everything on in October, and and hunting in western states like eastern Montana or western Nebraska or whatever for mule deer. It's such open country that as long as you kind of know what you're looking for, you can kind of start to pick apart and find animals that maybe other people might not find. And so, yeah, October is my mule deer month, and then November is my whitetail month, and then December is ducks. And then spring, April and May is just full on turkey hunting.
No ice fishing out there?
I don't do much ice fishing. I don't have time.
Understandable. Plus it's trade show season, right? So you got a lot going on there.
Yeah. This year was great. I basically skipped all trade shows except for Pheasant Fest. I decided that I didn't want to spend money going to just walk around and see everybody. And it was really nice to take a year off. I obviously missed catching up with a few buddies, but it was well worth the extra sleep and money in the bank account.
Right. So I saw that deer you shot last year, and that was a pretty nice whitetail.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious. I mean, do you get out and do you actually do a lot of scouting, or is it e-scouting, or you just kind of, depending on where you're going, you're hunting with some buddies that kind of put you in the right direction, or what's the?
Yeah, it really depends on where I'm going. Ended up shooting 2 whitetails last year. The first one I killed was early November 4th, and that area. I've been hunting this was the 4th year that I've been hunting in that area, and I have probably spent, 500 hours in e-scouting, and then another 1,000 hours of like putting boots on the ground over the last few years. Like it doesn't all spring and whenever I'm around in the summer and I cover the ground, and like for some reason I'm always thinking about that area. So that one, I've got some spots now that I, typically know I'm going to run into a deer or two. The second deer that I killed, I think the one that you're talking about is the one I killed off the ground this year. And that one, it was a completely new area. And so that one came down to only e-scouting. I had never been in that spot before. Had never been in that whole area of the state. So it was a shot in the dark, but you just, as you learn about where deer typically spend time, you kind of like cross-reference that with the map and where you found sign before, and be like, well, there should be something in here. And so, yeah, that deer I killed, I found that spot on the map. I think I probably, typically what I'll do is I'll pick say 30 by 30 mile square, and I will look at every public land spot that exists in that square, and stuff that looks like kind of interesting, I'll put a certain pin on it. And then when I'll go back through all of those pins and then really kind of be like, okay, this one is top priority, and I have different colors and stuff for which one gets looked at first. And that one was one of my top priority places to go. And it was it was only the second day of the hunt, and went down to that spot, and it was like a almost an hour drive from camp, because this year we were there and it was just a learning time. It was like all of us were going to hunt a different spot every single hunt, and just to like basically gather intel.
Right.
And went into that spot and immediately ran into sign and was picking my way through a patch of timber with the heads up decoy on there just in case I ran into a deer, and spotted one buck and started grunting at him, and he was coming, and I made a shift to get into the shade like by a little bush, and like, and then heard something behind me, and ended up being the buck that I shot was coming in from the other direction, and I had to spin around with the decoy on, and he basically came in to try to kill me, and I shot him at 15 yards. So
That's awesome.
but
is that the first one you've ever, like, first whitetail you've killed from the ground then?
it's the second one. Yep. And both I've killed using a heads up decoy. So
it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've always wondered how those I don't remember what the name of them are, but the ones that go on your bow that you can shoot through. I've always wondered how good those actually work. I always thought that was cool because I've had some similar experiences last year. Well, I guess it would have been the year before last year. Popping up over a ridge, getting out of my canoe, and it was one of those things that I knew there was a bunch of sign in the area. There was no way to get there. Finally, when I got there, I pop up and it's two does run past me. I go back to the canoe to get my bow, and all of a sudden I hear something else crashing. I get up and it's a little forky, and I put the decoy up in front of me and I'm holding it and it's flopping around. So I don't know how it didn't freak out, but he's standing there and he's stomping his hoof at it, and he's lowering his head, challenging me, and that was just amazing. I mean, I ended up being probably 8 yards away from him. It was just cool.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about those decoys is, so even if a deer doesn't like come in to try to attack you or whatever, it can be used in spot and stock situations where, say you're closing the gap and you can only get to 50 yards and then you've got to break cover. Well, a lot of times if you break cover and you don't have anything for them to focus on, like they blow out of there. But if you can sneak out from behind a ridge or, behind a bush or whatever with that decoy on there, they'll spend enough time looking at it, like where you can have time to either range, or maybe you've already ranged and you have enough time to draw back and settle in and shoot. It's a good distraction. And if any of you listening haven't used a heads up decoy, I strongly encourage it. Just call Garrett Rowe over there. He's a super good guy. And tell him I sent you. And I am a believer. I mean, that was almost my best year, and it was the coolest experience I've ever had, in the whitetail woods.
Was that an archery deer or was it a shotgun tag?
Nope, archery deer.
Archery deer. Yeah, that's really cool. I've never shot one on the ground with a bow. That's something I definitely want to do at some point.
Yep. Yep.
So, you got any plans for turkey hunting this year?
I do. Yeah. Trying to solidify plans. I might be going to Texas to do a Rio hunt. And then I'm doing a Cabela's photo shoot on turkey hunt in Kansas. And then I'll probably try to stick around for a day or two and chase my own bird. Kansas just went to a one bird season. And so, I think in a few days I could probably knock one down. But then I'll probably hunt Nebraska and then trying to organize a trip with Onyx Maps out in Montana. And I'll probably hunt Minnesota, Wisconsin, wherever else I can,
right.
As long as I have time.
Yeah. You plan on doing any more with the Hunting Public boys over there?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. We had talked about doing something in Montana together, but it just all depends on timing. So
yeah. So I got a question for you. There's a picture of Shane Simpson telling a story. And I asked Shane about the picture, and I didn't even notice you in the background, but the face you were making, he said, I don't know what the heck I was saying or telling, but apparently Sam didn't like it.
No, I saw that photo posted. Who knows why I had that face going, whatever. I was just, I was probably just tired, had been turkey hunting for a few days and was probably just wore out.
Yeah. No, I figured I'd just ask you. I figured it was nothing, but it was funny the way Shane told it.
Yeah. No, Shane's a good guy, interesting character for sure. And man, there's not many people better than him in the turkey woods.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, I kind of want to know: do you plan on let me rephrase that. So other than the conservation thing or the public land thing that's going on right now, is there anything else that you're kind of trying to focus on or trying to bring to light?
Sure. Um, I mean, not really. I mean, that's been such a high focus, and then even if the government decides to pass a public lands bill, basically protecting national forests and BLM for in perpetuity, there's always going to be something to raise money for, and there's conservation. Like, I think the next thing is probably going to be addressing like the lack of hunter numbers and figuring out ways, creative ways to raise more money for, to pay for all of the managing lands and animals. Um, yeah, that's that. I mean, if the public land and conservation side of things dies down, I'd say that focusing on the three R's is going to be the next thing. And really, like, it was cool. Randy Newberg always throws that or hosts that deer camp down in Arizona, and we had some really cool conversations, the whole group of us, about hunter numbers and kind of what that looks like, and just being able to hang around with a group of guys to have those bigger conversations was a cool experience. And I think the focus needs to be on, a lot of times agencies put a lot of effort into R1 and R3. So they basically they don't focus as much on retention as they do on reactivation. And now I'm drawing a complete blank.
So I think that's also very important, the recruitment aspect of it. Anytime that I'm talking to somebody that kind of seems like their interest is piqued, I will always extend an invite. I may not be taking them deer hunting or taking them to my favorite spots, but it's one of those things that I will always reach out to them. And I think it's super important because you can always take them, dove hunting or doing something where it doesn't matter. Take them to a public spot where there's a bunch of fields.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think all of us need to be taking more people. Right now, this year, like basically every year in hunters education, it's like 630,000 new hunters. And the majority, like there's a huge chunk of that stops hunting within 5 years. And so we think the next step is to figure out, how do we keep those people involved, interested, for beyond 5 years? Because if we can keep those 600,000 people a year, we don't have a hunting problem anymore, or we don't have a money problem. So I think that's probably the next step.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to deal with the fact that, I mean, think about how hard it is, and if you don't have a place to hunt or somebody else that's a mentor, say you're going out to a public land piece. I didn't kill my first deer on private without a mentor or anybody. It was just, me and a couple buddies that decided we were going to start bow hunting. And I think it was like 4 or 5 years before I ever killed my first deer with a bow. And it's one of those things that I could see how someone would very easily get discouraged and not be able to, just they can't see why they're buying a tag every year and just coming up short. And that could be frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that stems a lot from more of a cultural issue than a like a discouragement issue, because there are a lot of things that we can now do that are entertaining. They're fun to do, and they're easy to do, and they're affordable. Like like having to really work hard to attain something has kind of been a back priority for like our culture as a whole. Like the instant gratification, I think, is probably the biggest problem in regards to hunter numbers, because, like you said, it's easily discouraging if you don't shoot something every time you go out.
Well, yeah. And it's like you see people that go, especially social media. I think that's one of the evils of it. And especially if somebody, it's their first year or something. And I see it all the time. People start shaming them. Well, why'd you shoot that? Why didn't you give them another year? I don't care what it is. If it makes you happy, just do it. Just do it, because it's one of those things that people may be holding out. And I mean, sometimes I hold out, but it's mostly just for my own personal reasons, like I had a deer that was a nice buck come in this year on me, and he came in and I patterned him. It was the same spot as last year. And it was one of those things where he came in just on a string to the point to where I thought, man, if he does this again next year, it's going to be awesome. So I gave him a chance. My heart wasn't pounding out of my chest. I was calm. Now, he could have been a spike buck, and if my heart was pounding out of my chest, he would have probably went down. So it's just one of those things, especially, and that's like the out-of-state thing. I mean, if a lot of people get into that, as long as it's legal, I'm taking it. I don't care. I don't care what other people say.
For sure.
And then you got all these people that, posting things on social media that are hunting, $20,000 bulls that are, 400 plus inch, and they're posting it, and you think you got to compete with that. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's just when you start to try to compare yourself to that stuff, it takes all the fun out of it. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's just, you got to go do it for you, and that's it. Like whatever makes you excited, that's what you need to go do.
Yeah. So hopefully this year, my plan is, because I haven't really duck hunted a whole lot, and it's kind of crazy that, but normally I'm whitetail hunting, right? So it's one of those things. And if you're chasing that big buck, hopefully tag out early on a nice one.
Yep. Get
my other few that I want to fill the freezer with, and then it's going to be duck hunting. That'll be pretty exciting this year.
For sure. Yeah. No, I love the transition that I get to do every year with, you chase the Western big game and then kind of go into whitetails, which is certainly a little more relaxing than Western hunting, where you're covering miles and spot and stalking or whatever. Like to go back and either spend time in a tree stand or a blind or even hunting from the ground is just a little bit slower game. And then transitioning to waterfowl, where it's a way more social event, it's really nice to do that. It's like a break from the rest of it. I mean, it's still a whole pile of work, but you're not, worried about the wind, as much as you are in, chasing big game, and you can talk and you can drink coffee and you can, do all the things and hang out with your buddies and then call birds in and shoot. I think this year we're going to try to organize like a later season pheasant hunt in South Dakota as just a way to like kind of put a period on the season and just, have a big camp with the bus and the van and whoever else wants to come and chase pheasants and just go walk around and make it a big social thing instead of just, having it always be so solo.
Yeah, no, that's probably pretty good for the reactivation / retention, right? I mean, stuff like that. That's a good idea. Idea. So, Sam, that's pretty much all the questions I got for you. I appreciate you coming on. You want to tell people? I'm sure people probably already know where to find you, but you go ahead and tell them.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on. And if anybody else wants to follow along with what I'm up to and what we're up to, is either my personal handle on Instagram is just @Sam Soholt, or YouTube Sam Soholt, or our company is @Public Land Tees.
Okay. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on, Sam. Thanks for talking.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. If you liked this episode, please subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening to. Also, you can find us on Instagram @Publicly Challenged, and you can also find us at Publicly Challenged Podcast or publiclychallenged.com. So please reach out to us with any questions, comments, concerns, or maybe you'd even like to be on the show. And once again, thank you so much for listening.
Pursuing wild game in wild places. Tune in to Hunt Stand Presents Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment.
You want to succeed, you want to fish, you want to be one of the greatest.
Tune in to West Marine's Life on the Water, presented by Costa Custom Boats, every Saturday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV.